I'm Teresa Carraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. Today is Valentine's Day, and my youngest is inundated with flowers and teddy bears. Ah, young love. The oldest, which is the newlywed, has just today moved into their new home after a very rough start to their marriage, tragically involving the death of his mom. While he's been helping out his dad, she's been dealing with flooding and what turned out to be black mold in their rental apartment. So now, today, they have friends and family who are helping to move the hot tub and the last of the furniture. Nothing says Valentine's Day like blood, sweat, and beers. But while they can see the wedding day as the culmination of their last 10 years together, forever Valentine's Day will be the first day of their real new life. Today I'm continuing my Tonic Masculinity series with the work of William Hunter Duncan, who has been reading my Substack since before the whole Tonic Masculinity brouhaha, another term I hope that they'll steal. He writes born on the 4th of July, and when I posted my third video about Robert Malone, which asked whether he was the Zelensky of the COVID con, William commented back, "I used to think that Malone was a good man. I'm no longer quite sure." And he cited his post, which is called "There Was No COVID-19 Pandemic." He writes, "In lieu of a 2022 retrospective, I thought I might wield Occam's razor like a sword and cut down the COVID-19 narrative we have all been living with the last 3 years. With the help of the work of the biologist Jonathan Cooey, who I cited in that video, journalist-artist Sasha Latipova, and Catherine Watt at Bailiwick News. I am not a scientist, a legal scholar, or a journalist." What William then presents is a masterful summary of their ideas. And these researchers, I think, go further in putting all the COVID clues together more than anyone else I've seen. I've been in awe of Sasha Latipova for quite a while. He also quotes Dr. Mike Yaden, who once answered one of my comments by confirming that, from his perspective, there was no doubt that the adverse effects of the vaccines were intentional. I later found out that he was a former VP of Pfizer and not a fake one like in that bogus video. As William explains, J.J. Cooey is a virologist and biologist who's been reporting on COVID-19 since the beginning, accepting some of the official narrative but certain the virus was engineered. It has only been in the last year when it has dawned on him most of the basis for the narrative is biologically false. William then goes on to explain why a lab-generated pandemic or even epidemic is biologically impossible. As Sasha and Catherine explain, the zoonotic versus lab origin is a psyops within a psyops that is setting us up for future lockdowns and Department of Defense preparation against inevitable bioweapon attacks, as they would see it. And why? As a man after my own heart, William talks about economics and the banking crisis and the bubble of all bubbles, leaving the rich able to buy up everything after the devastation that we're going to blame on the non-existent virus. But the root of all this? Hubris. In the end, he writes, our globalist transhumanist overlords are totally full of shit, insofar as their dreams of control, technical brilliance, and evolutionary and intellectual superiority far outpace their actual ability, and they are forced to retreat into smoke and mirrors, fancy light shows, and overt authoritarianism to hide that simple fact. Biology trumps their tech, and they are merely human after all. Self-driving automobiles, flying cars, jetpacks, super duper cyborg warriors, designer babies, terrestrial immortality, becoming the singularity, robots doing all the manual labor, Neuralink gain-of-function pandemics made in garages, global programmable digital currencies, metaverses. Are there viruses in the metaverses? AI, all it is little more than the fever dream of control freaks. But as a man truly after my own heart, William ends with, this Substack, by contrast, is engaged in reminding people about our innate, magical, biological birthright. This Substack exists in part to remind people about crazy fringe ideas like the search for the Philosopher's Stone. Surely you have heard of it, some Hollywood version, Harry Potter maybe. What is the mythological Philosopher's Stone of the great mysterious alchemist? You are. Your body, your consciousness. You are the connection to the divine, God, the creative source. Augmenting your body and consciousness with fancy high tech is a false promise. You don't need any of that. You already have all you need. It is your birthright as a human. Try saying, I am the Philosopher's Stone. You might have noticed this is not what your betters believe about you. Much of this COVID-19 pandemic was about separating you from what makes you human. The masks, the social distancing, the suggestion that if we spend time together, it is akin to killing people. The shaming of pregnant women to get jabbed, to mask while they nurse their babies, the keeping of children away from other children, the masking of them when they were allowed to be together, the nudging to get us to fear and despise and shame each other, the encouragement that we should think of ourselves as a plague upon the earth, the idea that salvation, security is in technology and handing over our personal sovereignty and freedom to technocrats, the constant attack on every tradition, on any given word, on any given day, of the meaning that defines us, the censoring of anything not officially sanctioned, as if we are too stupid to think for ourselves, the abusive gaslighting, the slandering of the anti-vaxxers, the canceling, the ostracizing, the firing, calling us liars and misinformation operatives if we dare question the official narrative, the constant demoralizing mindfuck. I recommend reflecting on the Philosopher's Stone in 2023. Know thyself is the thing. It always has been and it always will be, no matter what the folks running the narrative have to say about it. May 2023 be your best year yet. For my title, I couldn't do better than William's next post on Sacred Masculine. It starts, when I was a young man, I was very confused about manhood. I never went through any kind of explicit initiation into manhood, as is common in indigenous cultures, typically around the age of 13. Growing up in America, coming of age in the 80s and 90s, the media message was something like, a man is strong. Then in that post, William lists 3 specific traits of a man as follows. A man can take care of himself. He is self-supporting. That does not mean he does not have others in his life. That does not mean he doesn't need anyone else. It simply means he can be alone and he won't collapse and fall apart, but rather thrive. Next, a man has skills. If you don't have any skills in something other than video games, if you are functionally useless, then you are not much of a man. There really is no excuse. Get skilled. And then a man takes risks. If you are risk averse, you are never going to grow up. Character is built by taking risks and risking failure. Failure builds character at least as well as success, arguably better. And he continues that a man protects. A man protects himself and those and what he loves. He knows how to protect himself and those he cares about from all that would tear him and them down. A man is a firm foundation. And then William says that a man does not try to explain the divine, sacred, sublime feminine, and links that to my article on tonic masculinity and feminine wiles. So I think he's the only of the 8 who was aware of that at the time. He then talks about how men and women need to re-enchant the world. And that reminded me of a title that I had on my bookshelf of Re-Enchanting the World by Sylvia Federici. And the subtitle is Feminism and the Politics of the Commons. This is put out by Kairos Books. Kairos is a Greek word that means the right time or the time of transformation. I use it in my chapter on Greece in my book as the lightning strike, the time that illuminates everything so that everyone can see what's really going on. And I believe I got it from another book in their series. The foreword is written by Peter Linebaugh. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. He wrote the Magna Carta Manifesto. And I did years ago a radio episode on that called The Tragedy of the Monopoly, the Comedy of the Commons. And I linked to that in the Substack version. I think that's a really important book because what it showed was that indigenous white people, men and women living in England, understood how to write rules that would allow them to share the land and take care of each other. As William would say, they had skills, they had knowledge, they did not ruin what was the legacy for all of them. As Linebaugh writes of re-enchanting the world, Federici does not romanticize the primitive. She's interested in a new world re-enchanted. As a woman and a feminist, she observes the production of the commons in the everyday labors of reproduction. The washing, cuddling, cooking, consoling, sweeping, pleasing, cleaning, exciting, mopping, reassuring, dusting, dressing, feeding children, having children, and caring for the sick and elderly. This is a different type of feminism than what we're used to with the break the glass ceiling and out macho the guy style. One of her cohort has written something that has haunted me, which is, after the revolution, who will clean up? It's my sense that men like building new things, but that the work of life is maintenance. It's the things that you did yesterday that you have to do again today, and you're going to have to do again tomorrow. So I love the idea that that commons is being combined with re-enchantment, which is a term that Linebaugh defines. What is enchantment? It is to fall under a rapturous spell of magical influences. By 1917, however, the meaning of the term had changed, losing its connections to the sublime or the sacred, and, like similar changes to the meaning of spell, magic, and glamour, its meaning found a limited discursive home in high fashion, the decorative arts, and Hollywood. No longer expressing powers of the cosmos and the body, these terms became limited to superficialities and superfluities. So that's an idea I am excited to continue exploring further. And finally, William writes about Second Christmas, which begins, "Many of my favorite writers on Substack have been writing about tonic masculinity, and I've been very encouraged by that. I want to encourage that conversation. So I want to say a bit about what being a man means to me right now, today, and this weekend." And then his post is about having recently sold his house in the city and moved back in with his parents, who are in their 70s. And they're having a second Christmas, which he describes with both great tenderness and realism, with a nephew, a niece and her boyfriend, his dad who gets exasperated, and his mom who keeps forgetting what day it is. Her cognitive decline has been the catalyst for him to make that decision. He writes, "That is what manhood means for me right now. Simply being a solid, quality, tonic presence for my family. One thing I am sure of, I am not going to regret spending this time with my parents. It's February already. I'll be starting summer vegetables soon. I have some logging at the 80 to do for an orchard fence. I have a garden and an orchard to plan. I purchased 50 bare root fruit trees. And I have a dock and a swimming hole to build. But this weekend, hopefully, me and my family are going to open some presents and pretend like it's Christmas." I wish them all well with that. My mom and my aunt were both what my daughter calls pleasantly demented, which is a technical term from her hospice experience. It means someone who forgets but doesn't get angry about it. Women are typically better at that than men. It sounds like William has already picked up on some tricks for helping with that, like don't argue, just go along with it. I remember when I was a hospice volunteer having a woman who asked me if it was snowing outside, and I said no, since it was in the 80s in California. And she said, "Oh, that's good. I've shoveled enough to last my lifetime." And she said the place she was pleasant enough and that the people were pretty nice to her. And I didn't mention that that happened to be her son, who at that time was out delivering the repaired musical instruments that he did at home so that he could be with her. I didn't choose to move back in with my mom after my dad died, although I could have. As my daughter said, if she had liked more of me than the part she needed, that might have been a consideration. But I did go back for weeks at a time, 3 to 4 times a year for the last 6 years of her life, and I was really happy to get a chance to develop an adult relationship with her and with the town that I thought I had escaped and would never return to. I also completely transformed the house where I grew up after she moved into assisted living and later into a skilled nursing facility. I tore up old carpet and found good wood that I stained dark gray. I painted the walls in bold colors of red and chartreuse and cobalt and aqua. I did metallic on the moldings. I got rid of the overstuffed couches and put in whimsical furniture. And I really made it my own, especially because I could get pieces from local artists that I would never have been able to afford in California. It was cathartic for me to be able to recreate my childhood home to match the person that I am now. And it was restorative to be able to be the person who my mom needed towards the end of her life. But it is a long haul, and it's good to pace yourself. As Brené Brown has researched, those who have the most sustainable compassion are also the people who have the firmest boundaries. So make sure that you're taking care of yourself. It would be my suggestion, maybe, to set particular times when you're all going to have meals together and spend time together, but make it a habit that that's not going to be other times. Find somewhere in the community that can be a second home for you, whether that's a cafe where you write, a library, a bar, a grange, a club, a hardware store, a volunteer job. Especially if you're not working outside the house, make sure that you have that community. So yay to tonic sons and uncles, and yay to men with skills and patience. Yay to maintaining the world and doing the work of life. Let's re-enchant the world. While I've been busy with the Tonic Masculinity project, things have been heating up with Ukraine and Seymour Hersh's expose on how the U.S. blew up the Nord Streams. Not a surprise to anyone with sense, but definitely confirms Michael Hudson's information about how this was an attack on Germany as well as on Russia. And so before I continue with this, I think I'm going to need to do another episode on Ukraine. But in the meantime, since William gave me the entree by mentioning Harry Potter, this is what I think is my cleverest episode, Escape from Azkaban, Victoria Nuland and Ukraine. And then this one on Who Stole Our Creativity looks at how men and women, when they were boys and girls, were expected to have skills in the late 1800s and 1900s. Thank you for watching, and thank you, William, for providing so much great material.